Good morning. I'm Diane Stewart, and I'll be the facilitator for the opening panel today. As you might be able to see from my bio, if you look in the book, I am by no means an expert in human rights law, nor on the refugee crisis or this humanity crisis facing Europe. But I can see that the problems are severe, that the issues are highly complex, and that the needs are somewhat overwhelming. But we're fortunate enough today to have with us our panelists who are experts in their countries of origin. They'll be offering us a glimpse into the many issues they're encountering in their work and discussing with us how pro bono lawyers can and should be responding. So I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce the 5 panelists. I'd like to start to my far left. We have Linda L. Kalash, the founder and director of Tam King Fields for Aid, a human rights NGO that seeks to enhance social and legal protection for marginalized groups in Jordan, including migrant women, migrant workers, and refugees. She's a founding chairperson of the Arab Network for Migrant Rights. In 2010, Linda was one of 9 individuals awarded a Trafficking in Persons Report Heroes by the U.S. Department of State's Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Person. Welcome, Linda. Our next panelist will be Roberto Barbieri. Roberto has extensive experience both in international cooperation and in the third sector. Last year, he became general manager of Oxfam Italy, after having directed the Department of International Cooperation for 7 years. With a background in economics and social sciences, he has taught at the University of Florence for many years and acts as an expert in the design and management of projects of cooperation. Roberto was also formerly a program officer for UNICEF in Central America. Welcome, Roberto. Next to Roberto is Luca Mazzera, a professor of criminal law at the University of Brescia and a lawyer specializing in environmental and immigration law. He's the author of 2 books and several articles published in nationally recognized law journals. As a lawyer, he's participated in important cases at the European Court of Justice and at the European Court of Human Rights. Welcome, Luca. Next, we have Marta Padavi, co-chair of the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, a leading human rights watchdog NGO in Hungary. Marta joined the Helsinki Committee in 1995 as a student while pursuing her legal studies in Budapest. As its co-chair, she oversees the Helsinki Committee's work on the European Council on the Helsinki Committee's work on asylum and immigration. Marta was previously a board member and vice chair of the European Council on Refugees and Exiles, and currently serves on the board of Pilnet Foundation in Hungary. Welcome, Marta. And next to me, we have Nick Patrick. Nick is a pro bono partner and head of responsible business for DLA Piper in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Asia Pacific. Nick's pro bono practice is focused mainly in the area of human rights law. He's a trusted advisor to leading global NGOs, UN agencies, governments, and businesses. He also serves on the board of DL Piper's nonprofit affiliate, New Perimeter. New Perimeter enables the firm to develop large-scale, high-impact pro bono projects in developing and post-conflict countries. Oh, mouthful. So we'd like to start. We're going to lead the discussion with Linda. And the format I think we'll take is that we'll listen to what each of these wonderful panelists have to say for about 5 to 7 minutes, maybe interjecting with some questions, but definitely we'll open up the floor to questions later. So if you wouldn't mind focusing on each of our panelists, and then we'll get the discussion going. Linda?
Yes. So, good morning. I will talk about the issue of refugees crisis, especially in our countries or in our region. I'm from Jordan, but Jordan, Turkey, and Lebanon and also Iraq. They have the same situation for Syrian crisis. At most of Syrian refugees at these three countries, with the situation of these countries regarding to the limited resources and the countries, they don't have enough ability to receive these people. For the issue of, as Diane said before about the access to justice, it's very difficult for these people to have justice in our countries and also in other countries. The most difficult issue regarding to deportation of them, and usually from Jordan and Lebanon especially, and usually they want to go to Turkey as a way to across to Mediterranean to European countries. The role of organizations or legal organization or lawyers in this issue, it's not clear enough. They are trying to play a role as to have impact litigation to enhance international legislation or international conventions in our countries. Some of this organization or lawyers success in this and the other not. But I think the problem also in our region, the absence of concept of pro bono. Maybe you will find the lawyers that they are very good and successful in litigation, but they don't have any idea about international conventions, about how to access to justice in real and actual mean of justice. I think this is the problem. You will find lawyer as advocate, but they didn't practice the lawyering, and you will find at the same time lawyer practice the lawyering without any idea about international conventions and how to make links between lawyering and human rights. As a human rights lawyering, it's very difficult to find in our countries. But I think recently the linkage between lawyers or advocate in our region and the other region, I mean European region or north of Mediterranean, now there is a linkage between this region because of Syrian crisis. Because all of us know now about what happened about Syrian when they across the Mediterranean to get a place, a safe place in other side of the Mediterranean, but they faced many problems regarding to this. No protection for them in the Mediterranean, no receiving for them. Recently, there is there are bilateral agreements between EU and some countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and recently Jordan, but this focus directly about how to press to our countries to protect the other side of Mediterranean, not to protect the people, not to protect the refugees, not to have legal channel for migrants in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So Roberto?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm the director, as Diane was saying, I'm the director of Oxfam in Italy, and we as Oxfam, we are a network of 17 organizations and very much involved in this crisis, mostly on the other side of the Mediterranean, so working and assisting our local partners in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Syria, and in many other countries, but also working on the European part. So We are currently working with programs in Italy, through Oxfam Italy, in Greece, and in the Balkan area. Of course, well, first of all, we don't like to call this as a European refugee crisis, because we don't think this is a crisis in Europe, because we are talking of 0.5% of the population, and if we call this a crisis, what our colleague Linda should say in Jordan or in Lebanon, when we have 1/4 of the population that are refugees. So this is one thing. Oxfam, of course, in providing humanitarian response also in Europe and in Italy, focuses on the advocacy response, because we think that is where organizations like us are more needed in these countries. And I would like to point out some of the issues that we are witnessing in providing the response in Italy that are of my great concern, of our great concern, and where I think a collaboration with an organization like PILNET and with lawyers can really benefit, Oxfam can really benefit from. So just to put this in a framework, we in Italy, even if in Italy has been one of the countries where the surge of the asylum seekers first came from the Arab Spring in 2011, and the numbers started to increase. Since that, and we have now talking about more than 5 years, we are still in a kind of emergency policy framework response. What does it mean, an emergency policy framework response? Is that we are witnessing two double standards of response in Italy, because mainly the response is managed by the Ministry of Interior and the local district at the local level through the prefetture, in a completely different way from the ordinary response of asylum seekers and hosting the refugees that we have in Italy. And this has been protected from time to time, so we assist to every 6 months to a new emergency response, and we are seriously concerned about the lack of minimum standards. Lack of minimum standards mean that the kind of services that are required to the organization that implement the services are really described in a very, very generic way. So basically you have to provide some shelter, to provide some food, to assist with language, and to assist in terms of health needs. But really in a very, very vague way. Only occasionally you talk about cultural mediation, and occasionally you talk about legal assistance. And in a situation in which you know that the people, asylum seekers, will go to a commission, and of course legal assistance is of utmost importance in order for have their demand properly scrutinized. What is the consequence of this choice? And we are talking now of 2/3 of the asylum seekers in Italy channeled through this extraordinary and emergency response, in comparison with 1/3 through the ordinary response. We are witnessing to what we call the localization of rights, localizzazione dei diritti. Depends in which province you are and which kind of services you will get, and that we are really concerned about. Of course, legal assistance is most of the time not provided, and this affects really much the likelihood to have the demand accepted or not. In addition to this, I think that the lack of this policy framework in the end create a kind of adverse selection of the organizations, because really there is an incentive to decrease the quality of services, because basically what you have is that you determine the price for the assistance of an asylum seekers. If the quality and the quantity of a service is very vaguely defined, and you don't have monitoring procedures on the organization which provide the service, the result of that is that you don't have any effective system in order to create to select the best organization to provide the services. And we assisted, of course, in Italy to phenomena like Mafia Capitale that, of course, are illegal because we are talking of corruption, but we are more concerned about a kind of legal framework that allow very, very poor quality of services. Couple of other things I want to highlight. One is that we are talking about very, very long terms for the demand of asylum seekers in Italy. We are talking of, on average, about 12 months. So a period that, of course, make the uncertainty so great in terms of the people requesting the asylum, and, of course, increases the expenses for the budget for many people before they move into the system. So there is a lot of public money that is wasted because of this long term. And of course, more effective and efficient procedures are an area that we think are greatly needed, and collaboration with organizations like yours is really welcome. One last point is that we have an overall framework in which assistance is not related with integration. So we have paradox that in many cases asylum seekers here for the first 6 months cannot work. And if you want, and they ask to be useful in the communities, they ask to do voluntary works, and we encounter, as an organization, a lot of bureaucracy that in the end don't allow us, or you have to find very difficult ways to allow to have insurance schemes, to have permissions from local authorities, when in some areas we can just extend some of the procedures for the disadvantaged workers that we have, and to extend also this to asylum seekers. But again, this is something where legal assistance, legal work would be really needed and appreciated by Oxfam from an organization like you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roberto. Luca? And I believe Luca is going to be speaking in Italian.
Exactly. I apologize for my terrible English, so I prefer to speak Italian. There is a possibility of the translation. I give you the time to prepare for the translation.
Great, thank you.
Sì, grazie prima di tutto dell'invito. Io faccio parte di un'associazione di avvocati italiani che si chiama ASGI, Associazione Studi Giuridici sull'Immigrazione. Sono il coordinatore del gruppo di lavoro sulla detenzione dei migranti, sul controllo delle frontiere e sulle espulsioni. È un'associazione che è composta di quasi 300 avvocati o comunque soggetti che professionalmente si occupano di immigrazione. Ed abbiamo una lunga esperienza anche in materia di contenzioso strategico, quindi di cause portate davanti alle più alte giurisdizioni europee. Le cause che menzionava nella mia presentazione sono cause che ho seguito come legale all'interno di questo network di avvocati. Più che parlare dell'attività della mia associazione, però volevo focalizzarmi su quella che a mio avviso oggi in Italia l'emergenza su cui concentrare secondo me più di tutto l'attenzione, e che è la gestione di questi famosi hotspot, di cui si parla da tanto, ormai da diverse settimane, da diversi mesi, e di cui non è chiara qual è la base giuridica e di cui non è chiaro qual è la vera funzione. E che cosa succede in questi hotspot? Che dovrebbero essere, come credo tutti sappiate, dei luoghi di brevissimo transito ai fini dell'identificazione. In realtà le voci che abbiamo da molti avvocati che lavorano sul territorio in Sicilia è che questi hotspot, che sono del tutto privi di base legale, si sono trasformati surrettiziamente in dei luoghi di detenzione in cui gli stranieri che rifiutano l'identificazione vengono trattenuti anche per diversi giorni, luoghi in cui avviene senza nessuna garanzia legale la distinzione tra soggetti che hanno diritto all'asilo e soggetti che invece, essendo migranti economici, sono destinati a un immediato rimpatrio. Quindi questa distinzione, che è una distinzione assolutamente fondamentale per tutte le conseguenze che porta con sé, viene operata sulla base di una intervista sommaria svolta senza nessun tipo di assistenza legale, spesso in una lingua veicolare, quindi non nella lingua che parla il soggetto che è appena arrivato, e questo credo che sia una situazione non soltanto italiana e che voglio proprio sottoporre a questo contesto, che mi sembra il luogo migliore in cui riflettere su questo tema. Il tempo è molto breve, però vorrei richiamarmi a quello che diceva il bellissimo intervento iniziale di Irene Khan. La rule of law non è scontata neanche in Europa e credo che questo sia proprio l'esempio migliore. Qui stiamo parlando di quello che è un diritto fondamentale, forse il diritto fondamentale, l'habeas corpus. L'habeas corpus, la tutela della libertà personale, il fatto che una privazione di libertà possa avvenire soltanto sotto il controllo dell'autorità giudiziaria. Questo che in Europa credevamo fosse ormai un principio assodato a partire dalla Magna Carta e quindi a partire da quasi un millennio, oggi quotidianamente non lo è, anzi viene ripetutamente leso. Io sono stato l'avvocato di la causa che veniva citata, la causa Kalaifia, davanti alla Corte Europea dei Diritti dell'Uomo, faceva riferimento proprio a questo, a quello che avveniva nel 2011 a Lampedusa, che è poi quello che succede ancora oggi negli hotspot. Lampedusa nel 2011 era stata trasformata da luogo d'accoglienza in luogo di detenzione, con privazione della libertà personale senza controllo dell'autorità giudiziaria. Ebbene, la Corte Europea dei Diritti dell'Uomo in questa sentenza del 1 settembre 2015 ha detto chiaramente delle cose molto importanti. Ha detto che nessuna urgenza può consentire una privazione di libertà priva di base legale. Nessuna urgenza, e nel 2011 c'era una situazione ancora peggiore di quella attuale in Italia da un punto di vista del numero degli arrivi. E ha detto un'altra cosa molto importante la Corte Europea: non ci può essere una distinzione tra richiedenti asilo e migranti economici soltanto sulla base della nazionalità, perché è necessario una verifica individuale delle condizioni del singolo soggetto che arriva sul nostro Paese. Oggi avviene esattamente il contrario. Oggi avviene una selezione sulla base della nazionalità. Gli egiziani e i tunisini vengono immediatamente respinti, anche sulla base di procedure che non sono chiare da un punto di vista legale. Credo che il mio tempo sia quasi terminato. Vorrei soltanto sottoporre a questo panel così autorevole di avvocati di tutta Europa, di tutto il mondo, l'idea di fare forse appunto una modestissima proposta, un coordinamento tra gli avvocati d'Europa focalizzandosi proprio su questo punto, che forse non è il punto più drammatico, la privazione di libertà, ma da un punto di vista, credo, nostro, come legali, credo che non possiamo che avvertire come assolutamente insopportabile che in Europa si arrivi a violare l'habeas corpus in maniera così massiccia. E allora forse un'azione coordinata anche davanti alle corti europee, alle varie istanze sovranazionali, potrebbe essere importante per risolvere questo primo problema.
Grazie Luca, grazie. Now we have Marta.
Hello, thank you. I really appreciated Irene Khan's comments. I think they were very inspiring and very spot on, and actually showed how there is essentially a common purpose for all of us, regardless of what we're actually doing during our work days. as lawyers. There's a handful of very core human principles that are not shared necessarily exclusively by lawyers, but we certainly, as our ethos, I think, should hold them very dearly. And particularly this last intervention by Luca also showed how at stake these issues are in Europe. What I would like to speak to you very shortly about today is how the Hungarian example, not going into the details of it, is actually one of the bad examples of how core human rights principles in Europe today are being eroded within the smaller context of asylum, but with certainly very strong repercussions for the whole entire issue of the rule of law in Europe and also beyond. The organization I work for, the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, is a very typical watchdog human rights NGO. We do advocacy and free legal assistance on refugee protection, criminal justice, access to justice, detention, police, and also lately, as the human rights and civil liberties situation in Hungary is declining, we've started to focus a lot on the rule of law in general. With regards to immigration, Hungary has had very limited experience. Overall, legal resident immigrants are very few in a country which has less than 10 million people. There are not more than 140,000 legal residents. Actually, some of them are here today in the room as PILNET staff members. These PILNET staff members are, and also others, are very typical immigrants in Hungary. They don't stand out. In fact, they're very well off compared to the general Hungarian society. They are not certainly an issue in the sense of maybe a test to the social welfare or the fabric of the country. Most are coming from the European Union or from neighboring countries of Hungary. Many of them are ethnic Hungarians. In fact, there is nothing that visibly makes them stand out. This is the kind of situation that we've always had in Hungary. Very few immigrants, very few visible minorities, a very homogeneous country that has not had any sort of direct experience with people who would be different. And there is, maybe understandably, maybe less so, a significant fear of the unknown. In a European Union comparison, the Hungarian society has always been found to be quite intolerant. And this is something that politicians obviously can and will exploit, and this is what we're seeing this year. Even before the number of refugees arriving to Hungary started to grow significantly, there was already a very strong, very nasty anti-immigrant campaign led by the Hungarian government that actually essentially has as its core idea that Europe and Hungary does not need immigrants. They don't do any good, they don't bring any benefits. Hungary should be for the Hungarians and Europe should be for Christian Europeans. This is something that I'm sure you've heard because it always makes headlines when our Prime Minister goes around and proudly makes statements like this. This was the context actually already set when the number of refugees started to grow significantly this year in Hungary. Previously, Hungary has not experienced in the past few years a significant number of refugees. The numbers tended to be slight, about 2,000-3,000 people each year, until the crisis in the Middle East, the security and the human rights situation in the Middle East started to significantly deteriorate. There was obviously then a growth in the number of asylum seekers that we were seeing, and this year is particularly, as everywhere else, devastating. There's been already over 180,000 asylum applicants registered in Hungary. This sounds like a huge number that will certainly put any asylum system to the test, and it has tested Hungary, but in a different way. At the moment, we probably have not more than 1,500 asylum seekers in the country. How can this be that amid the wave of refugees coming into Europe, Hungary manages to have only 1,500, and most of these people will actually be detained? This, I'm sure you know, is a result of this, not only the propaganda campaign, but also the legislative campaign that the Hungarian government has decided to pursue against asylum seekers, labeling them as people who do not have protection concerns, who do not merit protection, and then sort of stepping up the pace to introduce legislation that makes it a crime, a criminal act, to go across, to climb across the fence that has been erected along the Hungarian, Serbian, and now Croatian border. It is a criminal offense, and people who actually climb through little holes in that fence are receiving expulsion sentences of 1 to 2 years. There's been more than 900 individuals who are undergoing criminal trials because of this, and this expulsion sentence is handed out indiscriminately regardless of the person's country of origin, of their personal circumstances. Syrians will get it just the same as any Kosovars, and people will then be given an entry ban into Schengen, which actually means that they will not have the opportunity to even try to lawfully enter any EU country. There was legislation that basically emptied the notion of asylum in Hungary, and that effectively denies even access to protection for asylum seekers. This was introduced in August. In mid-September, the fence with Serbia was completed, and in mid-October, the fence with Croatia was completed. Now we are seeing about 20 people on average per day coming to Hungary, while our neighbors, about 50 kilometers away, are seeing Slovenia and Croatia, tens of thousands of people transiting each week. As we are sitting here, there are thousands of people stranded or trying to get to Germany through the Western Balkan route, and Hungary is not getting anybody. This is because there's been legislation put in place that effectively bars people from having real access to protection. There's been physical barriers put in place, and there's been a very strong campaign. And this campaign and these ideas are such that are being popularized and actually picked up by other governments in the region. I think this is obviously a very serious threat to human rights. At the same time, what we've seen is also another unexpected development, which thankfully is positive. There's been, in parallel to this very strong campaign against refugees, against protection, there's been an enormous enthusiasm among the population, not everybody, not the majority, but the silent minority who have in Hungary been remaining pretty silent and apathetic for many, many years, have actually become very moved, very upset, and very much mobilized. And I think this is something that we can, as lawyers and as people concerned with human rights, we have to be very happy about, and we have to think of ways to nurture this, to ensure that this commitment stays even if the refugees are going elsewhere. How can we do this? As a human rights NGO, we've been working with a very small community of refugee assisting NGOs in Hungary for many years. It seemed to be a marginal issue. But in July of this summer, we suddenly saw thousands of people being actively going out in the streets of Budapest, helping the thousands of refugees who were stranded at railway stations. We started working in a completely new environment. People, volunteers, had no idea. They were untrained. They were very enthusiastic, but they had really no idea about asylum law. So we started getting a lot of calls. That required a lot of human resources. We put out information materials, very simple, for the volunteers and volunteer groups to use themselves and also to distribute to the asylum seekers, the refugees. They were, in fact, our helping hands. They multiplied our access a lot. But we also had to clarify legal issues that sometimes were also new to us, such as what is the legal framework on the distribution of hot food, for example, to refugees. Can you do that? Where do you need to cook? What are the administrative rules? What do you do with people who want to take refugees into their own house free of charge? Will they be charged with people smuggling? Will they be facing criminal convictions? What about collecting donations, either in kind or financial? How do you do that if there's only an informal group? They don't have a name, a legal entity, a bank account. How do you get around that? A lot of legal issues came up that we ourselves were also not necessarily trained to answer, even if we're lawyers ourselves. We gave training to the volunteers and also tried to hook them up with experts on this. And this is actually where the role of lawyers and attorneys who were also very deeply moved, and there was in fact a smaller movement of private attorneys protesting against the new laws. We tried to tap into this resource, and also I think PILNET did quite a lot to link up the volunteers with the enthusiastic lawyers. I think there's a lot of lessons we learned from this process. Most are just dilemmas or ideas. We haven't been able to find developed answers to this. But certainly when we have a group of professional NGOs who are specialized in asylum law but unprepared to meet the magnitude, the scale of a problem, who have the legal training but themselves are not, maybe because of a variety of reasons, not in the position to deliver the assistance themselves directly on the ground. That's what the volunteers are actually very good for. But they're also untrained, they're not knowledgeable, they're also very flexible, but sometimes chaotic. Difficulties, of course, arise. And then, of course, there's a lot of lawyers, attorneys who are themselves trained in law, but not necessarily in asylum. This is something I think that's a typical phenomenon. And they're also unused maybe to this sudden emergence of need. They're also working in less flexible environments. So we need to work together to come up with solutions that address these issues, particularly because refugees are coming and the barriers that are erected are not going to make them stop from coming. There's also, I think, beyond this, a very sort of general underlying idea that I hope resonates with the very remarkable and very clear call to action that was heard earlier today about how we all can work together to uphold the fundamental underlying values that are the essence of the rule of law. Lawyers can actually be a little bit braver than normally. People who don't work in human rights NGOs can also stand up, as the Bar Association, or spontaneously, to stand up for values that are being attacked, targeted today, where actually the protection of these values, as we're seeing, are being described as something that is not only detrimental to the government's working, but also detrimental to our society, where the core protection of human rights is being increasingly portrayed as something that is against the benefit of society. I think it is our role at this point to clearly stand up and say, no, while we might have differing views on a lot of smaller subjects, I think we need to come together and sort of put together a very strong voice to ensure that people who are working on the ground, who are putting themselves at more risk, not only Europe, well beyond Europe, have the comfort of knowing there's a lot of people behind them, backing them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta. Thank you. Thank you. And now we'll hear from our last panelist, Nick Patrick.
Thanks, Tom. I would like to talk specifically about what pro bono can do to address some of the challenges we've heard about, but I think what I'll do is start by just zooming out and describing the scale of the problem, because I think the scale of this challenge really will inform what we can do to respond to it. According to IOM, there are some 700,000 migrants that have arrived in Europe by boat so far this year. About 570,000 of those people have claimed asylum in Europe. So it's a massive number of people. About 120,000 of those come from Syria, about 60,000 from Afghanistan, and about 60,000 from Kosovo. About 3,200 people are thought to have died in the Mediterranean this year, in the last 12 months. And so, I think with that, as I said, with that many people, with that scale of challenge, we need to be very careful, very pragmatic about how we can respond as a pro bono sector. The absolute priority in Europe will be to ensure that people are provided with an adequate and humane reception when they arrive. We have seen reports of people being detained without food and water. We've seen video footage of people being attacked. So the priorities clearly are not, the immediate need is not a legal response, but a legal response will have to be part of our planning as this crisis continues. So how can pro bono respond? I want to suggest 4 ways. The first 2 are perhaps obvious, but I think need to be said. The root causes of this refugee crisis are conflict, poverty and oppression. And obviously I think we can all do more to address the root causes of people movements. Our pro bono work is already directed to supporting the rule of law, equality and stability, and we just need to be aware of that and I think do more of that type of work where we can. The second thing is, I think, we can all work more closely with the organisations that are active in this area. DLA Piper has worked for a number of years now with UNHCR. We have had a full-time secondee working with UNHCR in Geneva for the last couple of years. We've also had a very close relationship over the years with IOM, also a pro bono client of DLA. And the more you work with organisations in this area, the more you start to become aware of the ways in which it's possible to respond and the ways in which a response will have meaning and impact in a situation, as I said, of a very significant scale. So those are the first 2. Then thirdly, I think we can consider the needs of the legal needs of migrant populations. Assisting with asylum applications is one way of responding, but this is a population of people who have very high levels of legal needs. Access to justice is just one of many human rights concerns faced by migrant populations. Migrants are likely to be extremely vulnerable. They have many overlapping legal issues compounded by language barriers, poverty, lack of social support networks. And so whatever legal services we set up in Europe, and many of us have existing legal services, legal clinics, dealing with housing, dealing with welfare, domestic violence, we need to ensure these services are accessible to migrant populations, and that often requires a little bit of effort to make sure we're actually extending those services to migrant populations. They also have some specific needs other than asylum applications. In our Amsterdam office, for example, we have a clinic set up which assists migrant populations with birth registration. And that is a significant issue for many asylum seekers. They have children, the children's births aren't registered, and birth registration and identity documents are a right in themselves, but also a precondition to the enjoyment of a number of other rights, so extremely important. And so those sorts of projects to support migrant communities can have a real impact on people. And those are areas where we can assist. Similarly, in Rome, here we have a clinic set up with the can't remember who the project partner is, I apologise for that, but we have a clinic set up assisting people who are stateless. And being identified as a stateless person also gets you identity documents, and again, a precondition to the enjoyment of a number of other important rights. And so that's very important work as well. The last way that we can assist is to help with asylum applications. Now, I've already said we have 700,000 migrants that have arrived in Europe this year. 570,000 of those people have claimed asylum. To put this in perspective, DLA Piper this year has done 175 asylum applications. So our pro bono work in this area, and we're a large law firm, doesn't even begin. It doesn't even scratch the surface of the tip of the iceberg, if I can mix my metaphors. We need to be very strategic about what we do here. So our work with asylum seekers is fairly strategically focused. I think we always partner with frontline service agencies. Our goal is always to identify the most vulnerable clients, to partner with organisations who will help us to identify those vulnerable clients and identify strategically important cases. Our goal is to ensure bad law is not made, and to support the development of good precedent. But I think if the goal of this forum is to expand pro bono capacity in this area, it needs to happen in a very strategic, very coordinated way. I think we need to potentially come together to determine what capacity is going to be made available in this area, to map that capacity, and then to collectively take that capacity to an organisation like UNHCR or the European Council on Refugees and get some guidance about how that capacity is going to be directed. We're working here in a humanitarian emergency. And in a humanitarian emergency, coordination of resources is very important. I've already said UNHCR is a very important client to us, one of our largest pro bono clients globally. And UNHCR is mandated to lead and coordinate international action to protect refugees. So we have to be part of a coordinated response. And I think in a humanitarian emergency, you need to be prepared to devote resources and be willing to let those resources be almost directed by somebody else. You need to be willing to participate in a coordinated response. So I think that's quite important. And perhaps there's a role for PILNet, I think, in coordinating the response. The last thing I want to do is just share some insights from the pro bono response to the Australian bushfires in 2009, because it's a very good example of I think, best practice in responding to an emergency. And there are other great examples as well, and I'm thinking of Haiti, but I don't know as much about that, so I just want to talk about the Australian bushfires because I was involved in that response. So as a reminder, on the 7th of February 2009, temperatures in Australia, in the state of Victoria, reached about higher than 45 degrees actually, so very, very hot. And there are about 400 separate fires that swept through the state. About 173 people were killed, 414 people injured, 2,000 houses destroyed, and about 7,500 people displaced. So it was a humanitarian emergency, albeit on a much smaller Australian scale. But it allowed us, I think, to have a coordinated legal response in a fairly contained environment. The legal assistance sector responded by establishing bushfire legal help. It was a coordinated joint response by pro bono providers through Pilch, now Justice Connect, together with legal aid, the community legal sector, and a legal foundation. There was a website established. The firms, and well, not just the firms, but also legal aid providers, produced a fairly comprehensive set of resources for lawyers that were working in this area, responding to the emergency. There was fairly clear demarcation between the roles of the different actors, the legal assistance sector. But from the client's perspective, they were receiving one integrated service, so the client didn't necessarily know they had a pro bono lawyer from DLA or from legal aid or community legal centre. They just knew that they were getting help. I remember at the time the DLA Piper Foundation had agreed to make a donation, and it was originally intended to go to the Red Cross, which was really the main charity receiving financial donations and providing assistance. But somehow, I don't know how I did it, but somehow I managed to persuade the firm that we should give that money to Pilch so they could employ a lawyer to coordinate the pro bono response. And that's what we did. Pilch employed a lawyer, and the lawyer who worked at the clearinghouse coordinated all of the law firm responses, so that there was one doorway effectively to reach all of the firms. And again, it didn't matter whether a client was referred to one firm or another, it was the same service that was available. But from the perspective of the people who were coordinating the response to that emergency, they were just dealing with one individual. And I think there is clearly space here for us as a sector to employ and share a resource to coordinate our response to this sector. And I think in this emergency, and I think in some respects that would probably be an ideal, if that was an outcome of this conference, I think that would be a very good outcome. I think my observation would be from working in this space for a couple of years. If this crisis had occurred in the same way as the Australian bushfires, that is, it had happened in one day or 1 week, our response probably would have been quite different, and we probably would have rushed to see what we can do. But this is a crisis that has crept up on us over a couple of years. And I think, frankly, we've kind of ignored it from a pro bono perspective. I know all of us have some small efforts, but I don't think we have made anything like the kind of effort we would have made if this emergency had happened in 1 day or 1 week. And I think this is an opportunity now to think about what an appropriate response would be. So I hope this conference marks the beginning of a more coordinated, more systemic and much larger response to this crisis.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. Well, so taking on from what Nick and Marta introduced as far as the role of the pro bono attorneys and other pro bono assistants, Linda, could we go back to you for a moment and just discuss how you could see or how you'd like to see pro bono attorneys and other assistants coming into what you're dealing with and
I think pro bono can play an important role more than it happened now by enhance the concept of pro bono among the lawyers in our countries. I'm sure not only in Jordan but in all our region they don't have enough information about the pro bono concept. And also maybe also the conflict between bar association and the NGOs in this issue regarding to, as they said, unfair competition. Maybe it's play a role for this concept to be not effective enough, as it's a big conflict between bar association and NGOs and regarding to this concept. And also to access to, if we are talking about refugees, to access to refugees communities, especially at the camps. As it's difficult to access to this camp, you have to get approval by the government. So I think we have to make coordination between civil society organization, bar association, lawyers, and as individuals, lawyers, and government.
And sorry to interrupt, do you see a need for primarily domestic lawyers, or is there a role for the international pro bono assistance?
In Jordan?
Yes, in Jordan.
In Jordan, no international pro bono assistance, but we are talking about some local NGOs that work to provide legal assistance for these people, including Tamkeen and other organizations. But for international organizations in general, like IOM and other organizations, except UNHCR, that she provide legal assistance or legal protection for the people that registered in it. But in Jordan, if we are talking about Syrian refugees, we have 600,000 registered, and all the Syrian refugees in Jordan, about 1,700,000. So we are talking about many people that not covered by any international organization. But I think it will be good if we have some capacity building for lawyers to have this concept, to know this concept, to know how to be advocate, how to provide this assistance for these people, not only for refugees, but also for migrants and women and other people that need help.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to turn to Roberto and Luca, and with the Italian model and what's being done. First of all, what do you think is being done well with providing assistance, with the pro bono model, with lawyers stepping up? Can you comment on that a bit?
I think that in terms of what has been done, I think collaboration between civil society organization An organization like ASGI, for example, is one of the area that is that I think is working well. I think the area where we most need, I see two areas basically. One is the area of the legal policy framework, so the kind of problems that I was talking about in my presentation is an area where we need to put energies together and to also to advocate for change. And the other area I think is related to, let's say, how to create a system that really spread out legal assistance. I think that we have to combine pro bono with the voluntary work of the civil society organizations, because I see the need of really reaching a large number of people with basic legal assistance, and I see the pro bono also in an area of trainers of training, training of trainers, let's say, that in order we have this system more spread out in all around the country.
Yeah. Luca, would you like to comment on that?
Yes. Sì, molto brevemente. In Italia abbiamo diverse esperienze positive di pro bono, in modo particolare in relazione a quelle che potremmo definire delle cause strategiche, quelle che ho già citato, il Dridica, l'AIFIA, il caso IRSI, quindi ci sono diversi esempi positivi. Però vorrei anche fare una cautela rispetto al pro bono. Bisogna anche considerare la necessità che ci sia da parte dello Stato l'assunzione delle spese legali per la tutela dei richiedenti asilo, e questo non deve essere il pro bono uno strumento per far sì che lo Stato possa disinteressarsi di quelli che sono dei costi dell'accesso alla giustizia, perché il pro bono, almeno dal mio punto di vista, dal nostro punto di vista come associazione, è centrale e importante per le cause strategiche. Quando si tratta, ad esempio, nel caso che vi citavo della Corte europea, noi per entrare in contatto con i ricorrenti siamo dovuti andare in Tunisia, perché ovviamente sul territorio italiano era impossibile avere contatti con persone che venivano detenute e poi rimpatriate. Allora in questo contesto certo il pro bono può essere di grandissima utilità, però non dobbiamo pensare che la materia dell'immigrazione debba diventare la materia del pro bono, perché poi ci sono invece una serie di professionisti che giustamente vengono attribuiti per la loro attività, ad esempio di fronte alle commissioni territoriali per la richiesta d'asilo. Appunto è pericoloso un'eccessiva enfasi sul pro bono come modo per lo Stato di disinteressarsi di quelli che sono i costi che invece deve garantire. Il gratuito patrocinio è un diritto dei soggetti che richiedono asilo. E seconda cosa, secondo me importante, si tratta della materia dell'immigrazione, si tratta di una materia estremamente tecnica, estremamente complessa, che richiede una alta professionalità. E quindi credo che ci voglia anche per i grandi studi legali che intendono approcciarsi a questa materia, cogliere l'esigenza di una formazione specifica. È quanto di più pericoloso immaginare di potersi approcciare a questa materia sulla base soltanto di una anche altissima professionalità, se in altri settori. È una materia anche molto tecnica, almeno la legislazione italiana in materia di immigrazione è quanto di più incomprensibile ci possa essere da un punto di vista non solo del cittadino comune ma anche del legale, e quindi vorrei focalizzare su questa importanza che questa rete di pro bono miri anche a una maggiore formazione degli avvocati che si occupano di questa materia.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize we were almost running out of time, so although I have a few more questions, I did want to open it up to the audience. And we do have a microphone if you think you need it. This gentleman in the front.
I can shout very loudly, but thank you. Hi, my name is Adam Weiss. I work for the European Roma Rights Center in Budapest. I'm one of the migrants in Hungary who meets the low profile, relatively well off. One of the things that we're not really working on the refugee issues, even if there are Roma coming in the current wave of asylum seekers. So I'm speaking more from my perspective as maybe a migrant living in Hungary. But a word I haven't heard used very much is racism in this panel. And it seems to me that that's a big underlying factor in what's going on here, that we're dealing with largely a crisis of racism and xenophobia. And in particularly in relation to Hungary, one of the things I've observed as an outsider living in Hungary is that it is already a deeply racist society in relation to its Roma minority. It's in many ways almost an apartheid society when we look at the conditions in which Roma live. And the response that I've seen from the Hungarians living around me, or not the Hungarians I know, but from the general population, seems to me of a piece with the sentiments towards Roma. And so actually it's just a reactivation of that racism that's already there, that Roma are different from us and the refugees are different from us. And so in that sense, I don't think there can be a response. It's not quite like the bushfire scenario, where we can just have a humanitarian response or just pour resources into it. There's something about mentalities that need to change as well. And I wonder if anyone on the panel has thoughts about that. Is there anything that pro bono lawyers can do, powerful people in society, to try to change those attitudes a bit?
Yeah. Marta, would you like to take this?
If I may. I absolutely agree. I think there are two sort of larger issues in the larger context that need to be or should be also addressed. One is the rule of law issues, how this is being led to use a framework that allows detention, the lack of access to legal aid, all sorts of issues that affect other people, not only refugees or migrants, but also the racism. This is certainly what we're seeing. I think everybody is experiencing this. We're pained to see this, is that their extremism, xenophobia, racism is on the rise. This humanitarian crisis is actually being used to reinforce very disgusting ideas, and we have to stand up for that. There are legal means to fight this, and there are also public means to fight this. One thing that I think is really missing from Hungary is that businesses in general should stand up for this issue. You know, core issues about what kind of society we prefer, what are the European values. This voice is missing extremely, and if the legal community would have the courage to stand up and say, not necessarily relating or reflecting on the day-to-day political aspects, but just general principles, I think that would be a very inspiring move that others could follow. We've had very sad reactions from individual businesses about why they're not standing up. I think there needs to be a lot more courage. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would like to give at least one more person a chance for a question before anybody else? Yes, please. Thank you.
My name is Osman Noor, and I'm a barrister from London. I've set up an organization called the Habeas Corpus Project, and I'm saying this because of something Luca Masira just said about the use of detention. It's something that I want to bring to everyone's attention because it's the worst manifestation of that xenophobia that is being inflicted on refugees in Europe. We actually do have legislation in Europe limiting the use of detention, and my understanding is all across Europe we are woefully short of coming anywhere near the standards that that legislation sets. In the UK, we detain 30,000 people every year. My organization works on a pro bono basis to try to assist them. And we had cuts to legal aid, which is another point that Luca mentioned, which is that we are now filling a gap left by legal aid and are actually justifying the cuts to legal aid because the government said, well, don't worry, pro bono providers will come in to fill that gap. And we're actually manifesting that promise that the government have made. And I feel perhaps there is a danger of this becoming institutionalized because it really shouldn't be. This should be provided by legal aid. But what I want to really use this time for is not so much a question, but for us to use the talent in this room and the energy in this room to collaborate on this issue of detention, because hundreds of thousands of people are being detained, and I wonder whether we can set up a joint initiative across Europe to implement changing attitudes towards detention and litigate, as Luca mentioned. So really just a call to arms on that point.
Thank you. Well, would any of the panelists like to comment on that? No? Linda, would you like to comment on that?
Only because I'm very interested in the issue of detention against migrants, and we are working on this issue by using strategic litigation, as we filed many cases against the government, especially Prime Minister and Minister of Interior, regarding to arbitrary detention against migrants. We success in one case, but it's good to have a successful case to get compensation in favor of Egyptian migrant that was detained for 13 months without any reason. I think the detention, it's a big problem in all the countries against migrants. The government and official authority, quickly they detain the people without any investigation, without individual investigation, only according to their nationalities, according to their situation. In spite, many of them, they are in regular situation, and many of them became in detention center without any reason. But it's attitude by the governments in many countries. Also recently, we submitted shadow report to CAT regarding to detention against migrants in Jordan.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Can I just say a word about Jordan?
Sure.
Yes. No, hello, I'm part of the host committee. I just wanted to say it's very important, the point of keeping separate legal aid from pro bono. And if you look at the brochure, at the program agenda, you will see a definition of pro bono that the Italian committee has come out with. And if you see, we have been very careful to try to anticipate a problem that was raised last year at the London Forum, and we've been very aware of. And so we've tried, and I've stated clearly that what we want to do with pro bono in Italy is totally different from what is legal aid, and the two things should be kept separate.
Thank you. Well, hopefully this will serve as a good introduction for your day, and that you can continue to discuss the role of pro bono throughout the workshop.